Picture this. You're cruising at 5,000 feet, enjoying the view, when suddenly absolute silence. Your engine just quit. Your heart drops and panic sets in. You have a few minutes before you meet the ground and every second counts. In this scenario, there is exactly one airspeed that stands between you and a catastrophic crash landing. If you fly too fast, you bleed altitude too quickly. If you fly too slow, you risk a deadly stall. Welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z. Today B is for best glide speed, the most critical number in your aircraft manual when things go wrong. So what actually happens when the engine goes quiet? Without thrust, your airplane becomes a glider. To stay in the air, you have to trade potential energy, your altitude, for forward airspeed by pitching the nose down. In aviation terms, best glide path is known as VBG. For beginners, think of this as your airplane's maximum fuel economy mode, except your fuel is your remaining altitude. For advanced pilots, this is the exact airspeed where the wings produce the maximum amount of lift for the minimum amount of total drag. We call this the maximum lift to drag ratio, or LD max. This is the point where parasitic drag from rushing air and induced drag from creating lift meet at their absolute lowest combined value. Flying precisely at VBG maximizes the horizontal distance your aircraft can travel for every foot of altitude it loses. It literally buys you time and it buys you options. Before you even face an emergency, you need to know your number. Where do you find it? In the real world, you would pull open section 3 or 4 of your aircraft's pilot operating handbook. In Microsoft Flight Simulator, in some cases you might be able to figure it out by looking at the checklist or by downloading one of the manuals which is available on the Microsoft Flight Simulator website. For Cessna 172, for example, the number is 68 knots. If you're flying more advanced or high-fidelity third-party aircrafts, check the tables of the electronic flight bag on the side of the cockpit or look at the reference speeds placard, usually stuck right on the instrument panel. Write it down, memorize it, or put it on a sticky note, because you won't have time to Google it when the cockpit lights starts flashing. So enough talked about all the theory, let's look at how we can use this functionality in real time. So we're cruising at 4,000 feet, as you can see we're on the autopilot, so really easy. So let's perform the first step, because let's assume that the engine now fails. And to simulate that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the mixture, which is over here, which will make sure that the engine really stops. So let me do that. Have a closer look over here. So here we go. You can see the speed dropping. You can see the propellers, I would say, going slower and slower and slower. And eventually the propeller will stop. That's, would say, nothing to worry, because we can have it in control. We can see that all the alerts are now popping up, right? It warns us, hey, you need to do something. Initially you can fly on the autopilot, but what will happen in a very short period is that it will start to stall. So let me switch it off. And then we have the aircraft in control. Now, the nice thing about this is that you can, of course, do a lot of things with the autopilot, but I definitely would recommend you to control manually. Now, the goal is to first, say, make sure that we're on a speed of 68 knots, right? Because that's recommended speed. And another recommendation is to use the trim wheel, which you can find over here, to make sure that you're, I'd say, not wasting your, say, power to keep the aircraft on that 68 knots, because that doesn't make any sense. As you can see, we're approaching 68 knots and we're coming closer to, say, the island, which is good. And we're also, say, losing altitude, and that makes sense because, hey, we're, say, out of power, but we want to make sure that we're, let's say, decreasing our speed We're decreasing our vertical speed as much as possible while still retaining that 68 knots. And you can see that I need to play around a little bit with the, let's say, with the yoke to make sure that I cannot say leverage that speed. If I would now say try it hard, right? If I would now try to, for example, pull back the stick, then let's see what happens. You can see that the speed drops dramatically, and you hear the stall already. You can see that I would say it does make any sense, because if I would do this, you can even see that the, let's say, altitude even drops faster. So let me, let's say, return to the normal position. And let's increase speed a bit, because if I increase speed a bit, I can also fly for a longer period. And you can see that now the, say, decent altitude, I'd say, is pretty nice. So this makes it possible for me to fly a little bit longer. And as you can see, the surroundings are pretty nice, but there's not really a spot where I could land. Of course, I could have used the nearest option, but as you can see, the nearest airport is 22.5 miles, which is a little bit too far away, if you ask me. But here we go. So in the meantime, I'm gonna look around, right, to see if we can find a spot where we can land. I don't see something here, maybe something on the other end, no, also nothing. So what we need to find is a spot where we can put the aircraft. And that always be, of course, a challenge. Because you can see that we're now dropping, let's say, speed massively or altitude massively, but also we need to look at our altitude or speed, because the speed is, let's say, kind of wonky. And I do think that I see a road or something here, so maybe we should give that one a try. Of course, you need to watch out the last part, that you're not, say, going too fast, because that's also not what you want in the Cessna 172. So let me see if we can make it successful. I'm gonna, say, reset the view a bit. So here we go. And you can see that we can, say, glide pretty long, right? It's not too bad. You hear the stall, right? So I need to, say, push the stick a little bit further to the front, because that will prevent me from, let's say, going into stall. But of course, it would also impact the, I would say, decent speed. I'm going too fast again. You can see the aircraft starts acting a little bit weird. And that's also the risk, right, of this, I would say, scenery, or if this scene. Because normally what you would do is, of course, use the engine power. But if you decrease power too much, then weird things will happen. And I'm pretty sure that this landing will not be really smooth. As you can see, I'm gonna also go outside of the aircraft. Let's not do that. Let's redirect it. What we need to watch out, because there are power lines here. Oh, I overlooked them. So this will be likely a pretty dramatic landing. Of course, as you can see, we need to watch out, because we're now gonna hit the trees. And that's, of course, the risk of what can happen. So this, of course, was not the perfect demo. I'm 100% sure that you agree with that. But this gives you an indication of what could happen. Every single aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator has its own unique best glide speed. Before you take off on your next flight, open up the checklist or the manual, find the VBG number and memorize it. It might just save your virtual flight. If this helped you understand engine management a little bit better, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what's the tightest Deadstick landing you've ever pulled off in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Stay tuned for next episode in our A to Z series, and as always, happy flying!